I was saying was, we're holding this event because the citizens of Berkeley have always said that they want to hear they want to get the information, but they also want to hear from each other about what concerns people have about zoning and what's coming down the pipe. Our city officials have, for the most part, declined to hold this kind of meeting, so we felt compelled to hold this event today. So one thing our city government has done is they make and continue to propose major changes to our zoning codes that incentivize developers to build market rate housing. So recent state laws make it impossible to reduce local zoning laws once they're passed. So we're seeing the skyline of our city grow, but rents have not come down. So today we're going to consider the factors contributing to the high cost of housing, the impacts of these high prices on Berkeley residents and our communities, especially people of color and those with low income. So B&C, Berkeley Neighborhoods Council, believes that the officials we elect must be held to act in our best interests. Our goal today is to spark discussions that will inspire you to get involved in charting an equitable path forward. So thank you all for coming today. I'm going to introduce our panelists. So starting on my left here is Whilmenia Wilson. She is the Executive Director of Healthy Black Families. And then is Kelly Hammergren. She's a community activist and the author of the Activist Diary and the Activist Weekly List of Community Meetings. And then, Fernando Marti is an artist, an architect, and professor in San Francisco housing politics at the University of San Francisco. And then we have Vanessa Vichit-Vadakan, the worker owner at the Cheese Board. So we'll be going to start with a question to each of our panelists. And the question I want you to answer today is, there's a lot of talk about how zoning changes are needed to right the wrongs of past racist zoning. Are current city council actions helping to keep our city diverse?
I'm really regretful that we don't have the opportunity to look at the front porch story introduction prior to having this conversation. Most often these conversations, excuse me?
Hold the
You have
mic.
to hold it up.
Most often these conversations come from a very intellectual place. The Front Porch Stories documentary lands it below your neck in your heart space. And I think that's where something as integral to human well-being as housing needs to be grounded. So I guess I will just ask you somatically to make that natural movement for yourselves as we begin this conversation. I think there are a lot of different perspectives to hold when it comes to talking about affordability in housing. I have to bring mine because that's what I do best. I'm a descendant of the African diaspora. When my ancestors came to this land, we were property. And I think that is the genesis of the struggle we have today that has scaled and now is impacting everyone. We have a capitalistic imperative that is grounded in the few owning much and others supporting that type of capitalism at their own detriment. We've never been able to unwind that type of economic model in our nation. We see it in mass incarceration, we see it in the school to prison pipeline, in all of these structures that scaffold our nation in that way. I think it's really, so my answer to your question, Janis, is no. I think that this is the most recent tactic. It's almost like a shell game to shuffle political motivations in a way that public can't interpret, digest, or take action upon them. I think it's going to take a lot more than policy to unwind that. We sit in historic Black South Berkeley, and we are in the midst of the largest mass displacement of Black people from this community that has ever happened.
Recording in progress.
It's not local only, it's regional, it's global, it's international. That's the question we have to wrestle with, and that's the problem we're trying to solve. It seems really curious to me that we also sit in the community where fair housing legislation was born. In 1963, the only Black assemblyman in the history of California passed the fair housing legislation, the Byron-Rumford Act. And as they struggled to make fair housing, and they weren't even talking about all housing, they were talking about multifamily units that made it easier for low-income people to be safely housed. Does it sound familiar? Yes. That was 63. This is 2026. And in response to that successful legislation passage, a conservative majority of Republicans passed an amendment called 14. It took the courts to step in. I feel like, and as crass as it might be, I feel like leaving this to politicians is like asking crack addicts to self-regulate in an opioid. I don't know how you do that without some kind of oversight, some type of regulation, and some kind of, at its crux, moral courage to do the thing that benefits everyone and not just individuals and interests. I think that's the problem at Healthy Black Families we're trying to solve for as it relates to the historic Black community that has built this community, nurtured this community, cultivated culture in this community, and now struggles to exist in this community.
Thank you. Thank you, Rena. Okay, so Kelly, your question is, why should people in Berkeley pay attention to the zoning changes our city council is proposing?
Okay, I broke all the rules. I have way too many slides. We're going to go through them fast, but I want to have pictures for you to look and think about. Okay, so first slide.
Just go down
The first slide is a picture of the stalled project at 2065 Kittredge Avenue. And that was initially owned by CH Ventures, which is an international real estate investment firm based in Chicago. They got into legal trouble, and now that's owned, according to what I could find online, by Quad Real International Investment Firm in Vancouver, Canada. And the reason I'm mentioning this is I want everyone to understand that when we talk about zoning and what's happening to our city is we have international real estate investment firms deeply involved in our city. Okay, so for those of you who went to the corridor zoning community meetings, the very first one, I have a picture of the t-shirts that the staff were wearing, and it says planning and development. And that's really what our planning department is about, planning and development. My next slide is on the budget, and we can just post these afterwards, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one shows the budget for the planning department, and what's really important about this is 74% of all of the income into the planning department comes from permits. And those permit fees are paid whether the project goes forward or not, they're paid at the very beginning. So the planning department has an incentive to have lots of projects run through. That's their main income, 74%. And so they're not getting money, they're only getting a small percentage from the general fund. Okay, my next slide, if you have seen it, shows the different divisions within the planning department. And I call this a closed circle because the city council sends the referrals to the planning department. The planning department brings them before the planning commission. The planning commissioners are appointed by the city council, and the planning department prepares all the reports and homework and research for the commissioners. So it really becomes a closed circle. There is a division within the planning department called, where there's a commission, environment and climate, but I have yet to when it comes to our land use planning. We are not planning for nature. We are not planning for open space. We are planning for housing, period. Yeah. So we're going to lose trees. It's going to be a lot of hardscape. We're not accounting for water runoff, lots of other things. And when you're getting told about how many stories you're going to get with a bonus density increase, you're not really being told the truth about what's going to happen. They will tell you that a 7-story, 75-foot height limit is only going to give you a 14 or 15-story building maximum. Now, on Monday night, we will have a hearing on 2029 University. And that building is 256 feet. It is 23 stories, and it is in a 75-foot zoning district. So just try to absorb that. And right now, the building that will be torn down, Pat, is a commercial building with businesses inside. And one of those is a clothing store, and they were hoping that they could find something nearby. In the new 23-story building that's going up, there will be no commercial space. They'll have parking on the ground floor. So 23 stories is way taller than what anything else around it. For those of you who went to the city councils on the 10th of February, there was an appeal of approval of 2109 Virginia. This is where La Follette was, and the members appealed this building. This building is 8 stories in a 35-foot zone. So it's way taller, and we have currently over 4,000 square feet of commercial space on the ground floor. And when the new project is built, that greater than 4,000 square feet will turn into 690 square feet of commercial space. So that means that for the businesses, save our shops, that are very worried about what's going to happen to them with this construction, there isn't going to be space in those buildings for them. That isn't part of the plan. And to get these 100% bonus, they are using, so a density bonus is if you include affordable housing in a building, then you get a bonus to build over and bigger whatever the zoning is. And that's tied to the percentage of affordable housing.
2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay, so we'll move along. So usually these 100% buildings are 15% affordable house, very low income units, 15% moderate income, and then they pay an in lieu fee because they are not furnishing the 10% of low-income units that they're supposed to have, okay? I'll just get to the last important thing, is that on March 2nd, Councilmember Kesawani is supposed to come back with her citywide local density bonus. And the citywide local density bonus gives all of the benefits of zoning. This is a lot of information. You can corner me or write to me. So Kesawani with our Mayor Ishii, Trigub, Councilmember Trigub, and Blackaby have a local density bonus that gives all the goodies of the density being building over the zoning, but they don't have to put any affordable housing inside the building. They pay the in-lieu fee, and the in-lieu fee is calculated on their imaginary-based project, not the whole project. So they're paying considerably less than what I think they should be. And so it really behooves us, we really need to pay attention to what our city is doing. We need to be going to the city meetings. You know, I really feel that local is where we have a chance to make a difference, but we only make a difference if we show up. And to go to a planning commission meeting, that means you would give up maybe 10 evenings in an entire year. Can we give up 10 evenings to care about what happens in our city? How much time are we really willing to invest in making our city a better city? And I would say that part of that city is making sure that we have space, green space left for what we hope is the next generation and even our generation. That we have trees and plants and things to make us feel healthy and good. And I guess I'm totally out of time, and Janis is going to take the mic from me. Catch me later, and I have business cards, you can write me.
So Kelly, I just have to say that Kelly goes to more meetings than anyone in the city. And we very much appreciate what you do. And she has agreed to stay afterwards if you want to talk more about how you can be more effective in your comments, or if you can be more effective with our city government. So for the people who are speaking, the mic, the speaker goes from the bottom of the mic. So please hold it upward. Okay, so for Professor Marti, Berkeley leaders helped develop our regional housing needs allocation, which outlines the number of housing units we need to plan for by 2031. Is Berkeley on track to meet our affordable housing goals? And what do we need to do to get there? Simple question. Simple question.
Well, maybe this is am I holding it right?
Yes.
All right. How many people here think that Berkeley is on its way to meeting its affordable housing goals? How many people here know what RHNA is, the Regional Housing Needs Assessment? Okay, so yeah, so I don't need to explain it too much. I'll explain a little bit, though. The RHNA historically, I don't know for how many years, 40, 50 years, has been allocated by the state. So the state tells every region how many units of housing you should be building over the next 8 years based on jobs projections mostly. How much is the population going to grow? How many jobs? We need to house those people. The interesting thing about jobs is you also kind of can calculate how many of those jobs are going to be high-tech, biotech, fancy jobs, and how many are going to be the baristas and the drivers, how many are going to be teachers, which means that those allocations are given by income levels. We know how much the city should be growing, or the region should be growing, in terms of housing for low-income wage earners, for middle-income wage earners, and for high-income wage earners. Those numbers, historically, this hasn't changed over 40, 50 years, is about 60% of the new growth are people who cannot afford market rate housing. And 40% of the people, allegedly, even though when you look at it, it's really kind of 20%, we were in the height of the boom, but the assumptions are that 40% of this growth of workers can afford market rate housing. So for the last RHNA cycle, the 8 years before this, in the region, we built about 20% of the affordable housing goal and 126% of the market rate goal. So a state senator got in his mind that this was too low. 126% of market rate is setting the bar too low. We should really expand those numbers, maybe triple those numbers. And so the state senator, Scott Wiener, created and part of it was, it made a lot of sense. A lot of cities weren't building even their market rate goals. So we should increase those goals to make up for that. Originally in the letters that he wrote, he said, we're going to look at those cities that weren't building enough. Somehow that went by the wayside, and then they said, well, we're going to come up with some new ways of calculating this. We're going to look at rent burden. There's a lot of people who pay more than 50% of their income in rent. We're going to add that to our jobs projections. And we're going to look at overcrowding. There's a lot of households where there are more than 2 people in every bedroom. We call that overcrowding. So we're going to add that to the calculations. Based on that, they came up with a number that was 3 times higher than the previous number. Now, if you think about overcrowding and rent burden, does that affect the tech bros? No. That's more, you would then imagine that lower income goal would have gotten larger. That's not what came out of the, I don't know, chopping block, meat grinder at HCD. HCD is the state Housing and Community Development Department. So they came up with this goal that was 3 times as big, and then they said for every region, you then have to go and allocate that for every city somehow and come up with some method. And I was in that committee. Your venerable former mayor, Jesse Hammergren, was chaired that committee. Ooh. And there were different ways of allocating this. Basically, it meant every city had to go up by 3 times as large. So now we've got this, the question was, how well is Berkeley doing in meeting these new goals, these new higher, 3 times as high goals? So for Berkeley, this RHNA says that you all have to build about 9,000 units over 8 years, with about, around 4,000 of those being market rate and about 6,000 of those being affordable. So 59% should be affordable. In 2022, 16% of what was built was affordable. 2023, Berkeley did a lot better, 27% was affordable. In 2024, 20% was affordable. So each time, if your goal is that 59% should be affordable, you can see how you're getting further and further and further away. And this has been, historically, this has happened. This isn't just this cycle. But that is what you are seeing if you don't have a plan and funding to make it happen. So the second part of the question is, how do you make that happen? And so let's say I'm a politician, and I'm looking at this problem, and I say, gee, we want to build more affordable housing. What tools do I have? Maybe I'll zone up, and somehow that will magically create more affordable housing. Do we think that's going to work?
No.
Okay. What other tool? Maybe we can streamline approvals for all housing. Do we think that's going to create more affordable housing?
No.
Now, somewhere along the line, some of these folks say, well, Ronald Reagan had this amazing trickle-down theory. Maybe it still works. And in fact, it does work. If you build enough luxury housing, for about 100 years. The people who are the next layer down from luxury, their rents will go down. It is true. But for the rest of us, in fact, what happens is the rents go up. And the rents go up because you are now gentrifying like crazy. The other thing that's part of this is an approach that is based on zoning or approvals of housing for market rate housing means that let me back up. How many people here own their own homes? Okay, when you see an assessment of your home, it's oftentimes separated between the value of the land and the value of the improvement, right? It's a kind of a made-up number, but there's a value to your house, and then if that house were to suddenly disappear, there's a value to that land. What do you think determines the value of that land? Location. Why is location important? Transportation. Who wants to live there, really? Who wants to buy that? So you buy a piece of land. What else is going to determine the value of that land?
What you can build on it.
What you can build on it. So if you zone up, what do you think happens to the value of that land? By the stroke of a pen, without that landowner having done anything to improve that land, their value goes up. If the problem is, how do we build more affordable housing, and you're trying to compete to buy more land to build more affordable housing, but you just zoned up to build more luxury housing, do you think you are making it easier or harder to build more affordable housing? Harder. So this is the conundrum that we're facing. Do I have a solution? The solution is partly that we need to stop chasing false solutions. And as you said, I think a lot of that starts locally. But as with the example around the Fair Housing Act, a lot of what there is a lot of power at the state to make a change and also to do a lot of harm. And what we're seeing is the state doing a lot of harm by imposing rules on what you all can do city by city, sometimes for good reason and sometimes for bad reasons. A lot of the reasoning for this has been put in terms of racism, and the racism of zoning that created exclusionary neighborhoods, the racism of racial covenants over time, the racism of redlining and other practices that banks put in place, and the racism of urban renewal, including things like building BART tracks that might have separated neighborhoods, but maybe went underground and destroyed the commercial strips, things that were imposed by the state. What we see now is a racism that excludes people from certain neighborhoods through economic means. And if your policy is mainly gentrifying those neighborhoods and not creating those opportunities for people to move into those neighborhoods or creating inclusive neighborhoods, those state laws are actually reinforcing racial and class exclusion in neighborhoods. And that is something those folks never want to talk about, but that's what we're seeing. Part of what the politicians are stuck with is that they can't really, or don't want to, talk about the need to fund affordable housing. So on the one hand, as you mentioned, they are cutting back on inclusionary housing in these upzonings, the density bonus ideas that they come up with. But on the other hand, they're going for these false solutions because they're not wanting to talk about how they fund real affordable housing. I'll end by just saying other cities in other parts of the world, so there's all this discussion now about social housing, and people look at cities like Vienna, and they look at cities like Singapore, so you can go kind of lefty and go to Vienna, you can go more conservative and go to Singapore. What defines those cities, and they have some really expensive housing, is that about 60% of their housing is in some sort of subsidy. They're either subsidized rental housing, Singapore is much more of a homeowner approach, but they understand that just like here, about 60% of the population is not going to be able to afford the new market rate housing, and if they are going to truly address that, they need to figure out how to fund, and they've got lots of different ways of doing that, about 60% of the housing as being affordable to a range of people. Folks from very low-income folks to folks like teachers and professors like me who can't afford market rate housing. So I'll end with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So one of the things that the City Council is currently debating is this corridor upzoning plan, where they're going to allow more housing to be built in the Elmwood, North Shattuck, and the Upper Solano. So Vanessa is here from the Cheese Board. So how will zoning changes in our commercial districts affect small businesses? And how are your concerns being addressed by our City Council?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Vanessa. I have been with the Cheese Board Collective for almost 8 years now. And for those of you who don't know, it is a worker-owned, cooperatively run business, which means that all 54, 55 of us at the moment make decisions about the business together. So I'm coming from the perspective of someone who is working with the democratic process and takes it very seriously every day. And when that doesn't happen at work, it affects us all. I'm also coming from the perspective of somebody who was priced out of the rental market in Berkeley about 15 years ago. And as somebody who owns I'm also coming from the perspective of somebody who owns a business with coworkers who are commuting an hour plus because they had to move further away. So the idea of having affordable housing, awesome. That sounds fantastic. This is not an official Cheese Board line, but I think that most of us, if not all of us, feel very excited about the idea of having affordable housing. But then we get into the definition of what affordable means, and from what we understand, it means that none of us at the Cheese Board could afford to live in these units. So I might be stating the obvious, but I feel like it's important to say that affordable housing needs to be actually affordable for the people who need it. So I was thinking about this question and what the positives are about this kind of a development, and what the negative impacts could potentially be for us. And I sat with some of my coworkers and kind of fleshed out some ideas, and there are some positives for sure. One of them is, a vitalized neighborhood, more people in that neighborhood, more people patronizing the small businesses that are in those neighborhoods. That's kind of the biggest and probably most obvious positive effect that increased housing could have in these neighborhoods. That positive is conditional on the fact that the small businesses stay in those neighborhoods. And there is all the disruption that can come with construction, right? Noise, dust, all the sidewalks being blocked that could, of course, disrupt regular business. But for small businesses, that can make or break a business. So I will also say that I am speaking from the perspective of somebody who owns a business, who is in this incredibly fortunate place to own their building. So the cheese board, if people didn't know, we own between 1500 and 1512 Shattuck Avenue. And so the possibility of displacement for us is not there. Like we might have decreased business or reduced revenue, but we're not going anywhere. All of our lovely neighbors that create the fabric of that community are at huge risk for losing their businesses. I'm losing track of which meeting this happened at, but there was, I think it was at the Planning Commission meeting a couple weeks ago where they were talking about ways to soften the blow to small businesses by offering packages to relocate the small business. And as if it's, I mean, I don't really need to flesh this out, but as if it's easy to pick up your business, move across town, and then 3 years later move it back. And okay, so one of the concerns that we have, one of the greatest concerns that we have is that we have not been notified by the city or involved in the process of giving input or letting the city know what our concerns are. And so we've actually had the opportunity to ask a couple of times how they'll address parking, and how parking hasn't really been factored into our neighborhood. I'm speaking specifically about the Cheese Board neighborhood, which would have a building, one building south of 1512 Shattuck at the old Bank of America building. It's not taking, the development isn't taking into consideration how parking will affect, or lack of parking will affect the neighborhood, or thinking about how people who don't rely on cars, like how they can better serve those folks. We are concerned about our neighbors being displaced. Some folks might remember there was a florist who occupied the space in front of the Bank of America building. When the Bank of America closed, they were moved across the street, and it's a great little storefront. It's visible. It's in the path of foot traffic. Their business has dropped more than 50%, I believe, this last number I heard. So we want to see these small businesses thrive. And something as small as having to cross the street can make or break these businesses. We're concerned about the potential for empty storefronts, and not to mention empty units that people can't afford. But I think we are familiar with what's going on downtown. When we've asked about sort of taking care of the downtown situation first, I think it was also at the Planning Commission meeting where the response was, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the upzoning of these 3 other areas. So it's all related. And so what was the second part of your question?
It was, how are your concerns being addressed by city council, which you're sort of answering now?
Yeah, so our concerns are being addressed because we're squawking. I don't know if they're being addressed, but it currently seems like we are being given opportunities to give some input and feedback, but it seems like the plan is already in place. So that, again, coming from the place that I work and having process be so important to what we do. And as people were mentioning before, you know, starting on a micro level here, if we can't pull this off, if the city of Berkeley can't pull it off, it feels kind of daunting that anybody else would on a larger scale. This is what Berkeley does. This is what we should be able to continue to do. So, yeah, there's there's a lot of negatives for sure, and I don't want this to just be just sort of putting down the idea of construction or housing. I'm looking for cooperation in getting input to make this housing thoughtful and to fulfill the needs of the neighborhoods without threatening the businesses that occupy them. Thanks so much.
Wow, lots to think about. So I'm going to open it up now to questions from the audience. I saw some hands raised earlier, so I'm going to just start back here. Oh, and one request I have of everyone who's going to ask a question, please try to get to your question and not talk a lot about the background. Thanks.
Professor Marti, what you say is eminently reasonable. And so I'm wondering, I have a two-part question. Why do you feel that what you say doesn't quite get the audience that the YIMBY narrative gets? And then you also specifically pointed to Senator Weiner. Have you or others been able to document, he seems so motivated, it seems as if he must be carrying water for someone else. Has money to him from real estate industry been documented? Because a lot of us in Berkeley feel we're up against that with our elected politicians too. They seem to be working for real estate lobbies.
So where's the money?
I don't want to speculate on the money, but I think it is clear, you know, you see these things happening. I think there's something that connects, though, the money and the ideology. Right? And those two things go together. And, you know, different politicians try to appeal to different bases. And the base of people like Scott Weiner or generally the YIMBYs has this very, I think, colorblind and class-blind approach to housing. And housing, which really means, you know, if you take that out, it just means development. And it means market rate development. As Kelly was saying, it's more and more transnational investment development that is behind that. But the base is looking at, we just need more housing. That's all we need. And it's hard to then turn back and say, but who are you talking about? Housing for whom? Right? And so you get into, you know, let's go through these numbers. Let's look at this RENA. Let's look at these 60%, right? And you sort of get a little bogged down. And, you know, in academic terms, we love this kind of stuff. Or if you're a statistician, you love that kind of stuff. But ideologically, it's hard to argue with a very simple and simplistic housing, yes or no, trickle down. And you're done, right? And what's fascinating to me is that a place like Berkeley seems to have so many people who have bought into it, or at least have the politicians have pulled them along on that course.
Okay, George.
So, I want to follow up on that, and I want to first appreciate.
Microphone, no. Yeah.
No. I want to appreciate all the speakers, and particularly Mina's ability to root this in the realities of people's lives. I can't approach the depth that you spoke to. About the politics that we're just now talking about and about the money, I'm really interested in any research that people have done about, and it should be easy to find out where's the money trail coming from the, to the 9 people on the council who support these development. Okay, well, let's get it out there. But in particular, I'm looking not just at the sort of the bourgeois leaders. I'm looking at those elements of the left, because it's not just left versus right. Young, progressive, socialist people who are saying, well, the argument is, look, you all, sometimes they'll say rich, older, white, hill dwellers and all this stuff, you've made it, but we'll never be able to, you know, and they have a critique of society, but they don't have a class or race critique about housing. They just don't. And I'm just wondering if there's any help that, or any experience, how do we deal with these folks who should be our total allies and are on everything except housing? And they just, you know, it's like everything we said, it's trickle down. They're too young to remember Reaganomics, but I think we have a leg up on that. Thanks.
Nina, do you want to answer that one? Want to comment?
Yeah. So I think this is the reason why education, especially historical education, is key to liberation and freedom. It's also the reason why there is an assault on education in this current era. The type of wisdom George is saying is eluding us is grounded in this kind of multi-generational lived wisdom. And we are not supporting deep knowledge of that. The other thing is, I have a saying here at Healthy Black Families as we serve community, and even as I brought my leadership to Healthy Black Families, as someone who wasn't deeply steeped in the work they did, I had to understand how to bring my leadership in service of something, which took deep inquiry for me. It wasn't just, I show up and I do what I do. I had to analyze and understand not only the staff I was leading and co-leading with, but also the community that we are serving. And it's incumbent upon those in leadership to do that. The wisdom of anything lives closest to the experience. And if you're not engaging the experience of people that you're serving, you are inept at trying to do anything. You can't, through that kind of disconnect, build, grow in a way that really serves community. So, to extend that, I'll say that, Healthy Black Families is not a housing organization. Never was. We have our roots in maternal, child, and adolescent health. We got called to this work because of the deep impact that housing has on the quality of life for the most vulnerable in our world. Mothers, children, babies. We were in a meeting, I think Willie was there, I just saw Willie leave a couple of days ago with Jordan Klein from the planning department. There you are. And he was talking about engaging community in these portfolio of projects that are going on in Berkeley, from the quick outline build to a dog park down here. And but there are these disingenuous threads to those narratives where he says, we want community at the table. Okay, we're here. And we want you to bring other communities to the table to talk about these developments. Okay. And I said, so are we talking, and he said, community engagement. I'm not talking about community engagement. I'm talking about centering community in the decisions you're making. It's a big difference. And then as the conversation went on, he's like, because we need to have them, you know, talk about where they want these bike lanes and these bike racks. And I'm like, who even told you they wanted that? So what are we talking about? Are you trying to get us to, you know, check your tactical already defined list? Or do you really want to engage people with the wisdom of how this community needs to be designed, developed, financed, structured in the conversation? So, I think we really, and I know there's a contingent working on leadership around how we construct our city council as elections are coming up, but I think we really have to start at a values basis and find people with the moral courage to do the right thing.
Thank you, Nina. Okay, Margot, you're up, and then I'm going to the back.
Yes, thank you very much. It's very encouraging to hear this. There are many of us who are very angry about what's going on, and we're trying to elect new city council people in this coming election. There are 4 seats coming up. There's Humbert, Tri-Ip, Kasarwani, and Lunapara seats coming up in the next election. And there are some of us who are looking for candidates that we can support and we can endorse and work for. And do you have any ideas about candidates that we could be? Are there any candidates that have come forward? If you can think of any, we'd really like to know them. Thank you.
So Margot, are you going to hold the breakout room after this?
Sure.
Okay, so we'll have a space for her. I saw some hands back here. Can you stand up, Moni?
Hi, Moni. This is a question for all 4 of you. Janis asked the question.
Can't hear you.
Is this better?
Yes.
Okay. Janice asked the question, what are the solutions? I'm one, and Professor Marti, you mentioned that to get to an adequate amount of affordable housing, 60% of housing needs to be subsidized. I'm wondering how a city like Berkeley gets there. And this is a question for all 4 of you. I would love to hear your ideas. And as far as candidates, if you're frustrated with, I'm just going to add this, I hope you don't mind, Janis. My name is Moni Gangopatay, and over here is Aiden Hill. I'm putting you on blast. We are 2 candidates who are running for city council, and we're in the room. So feel free to talk to us.
Excuse me.
I'm gonna put your name. Anyone want to take that question? How do we get to that 60%?
First, we're going to talk about taxes, right? And some of this is what we're stuck with at the state level with Prop 13. But some of this is what we can do locally. And so that's one part of it. One of the kind of dirty secrets about affordable housing is that most affordable housing, unless it's housing that is meant to serve folks who've been homeless or perhaps seniors who are on a fixed income, most housing, the rents that low-income people pay is enough to keep that housing going, meaning those rents pay for the property management, pay for insurance, pay for keeping the lights going. And so when you think about luxury housing, everything above that, of what a low-income person can pay, is what's going back to those Wall Street investors and those hedge funds that have invested in that housing. So when we build low-income housing, you need the money up front to build it. and you don't need to keep subsidizing. If you build housing that is for a slightly higher income level, so teachers, for example, you can build that mostly with loans that are paid back by those rents. Now they have to be lower interest loans, which right now we've got a challenge with. So this is just my plug for what we're trying to do in San Francisco. We're trying to start a public bank using the city's reserves. There's an effort at the state of California to start a public bank. And so that would be the kind of financing that could really push construction. But you've got to have this back and forth. There's the what it is, and then there's the who it is. And I think the question that was raised earlier is, who does the housing serve? Even the affordable housing. In my mind, we want an affordable housing that is for a whole range of income levels. But you have to understand where that need is and where that, how much subsidy you're going to need for some or the others. What happens in the political realm or the housing agency realm is, the austerity approach. Well, we don't have enough money to serve formerly homeless folks. So we're going to go a little higher. We're going to go a little higher. And suddenly your whole program is based around a middle income program, which might actually be a really necessary thing, but you're robbing from one to pay the other. And so that pressure is always there with those politicians. So keeping centered where the greatest need is and how you're going to serve that need as you're coming up with those revenue measures is really important. So I could talk about that for a long time. Yeah.
So one of the things I've studied over time is systems. It began as I was an auditor in the banking industry just out of college, trying to figure out how transactions move from one hand to another and the gaps between them. And that's gone from there to implementing a system at Morehouse School of Medicine and Emory University, Winship Cancer Center, and I retired from Kaiser, looking at their national system. And there is a way that somehow, some way, these systems morph to become in service of themselves. So as I look at healthcare, it no longer becomes about quality medical care, it becomes about algorithms and, these medical, ways to make the medical system function that's not to the benefit of people. I look at the education system, the same thing. So I think back to, I think it was 2 years ago, maybe at Juneteenth, Bridge Housing had just won the North Berkeley BART contract, and my real concern was the land. Like, the ancestors whispered to me, ask for the land. And I was like, okay, I will. So I started talking to them about the land contracts, these 99-year leases that BART is negotiating for this affordable housing. Right? And I must say that there is a solution because we're in one today. The Maudelle Sherik community is an example of affordable housing from homeless to 80% AMI that the city has orchestrated and is operational, right? So we can't say that it can't happen. We're sitting in it. So I asked about the land, and the gentleman who I was speaking with said, well, the way it works is, and he went on to explain to me the affordable housing industrial complex, right? And then he looked at me and said, so do you get it? Like, you understand now? And I was like, well, I do understand. And the first thing you said as you opened up was, the way it works is. I said, that's what we have a problem with. Because that's where the equity starts. So I think also when we started Equity for Black Berkeley, a initiative funded by the San Francisco Foundation that we used to collect data from the community here about their priorities for the development of this corridor, there was a finance team, very illustrious people, who mostly white male. I was actually not invited to that because I guess they thought the black woman leading a nonprofit knows nothing about finance. Although it is my degree, but no one asked. But as they sat talking about financing, I saw them kind of wrestling with all these old methods and trying to figure out like, well, how do we apply this to that? And what I said is, I appreciate your wrestling, and you can't stop wrestling, because what we're trying to do, you haven't done. So you must continue wrestling at the boundaries of this to develop a new solution that will better serve the communities that we need to support. That's my response.
I'm going to apologize in advance. We're not going to get to all these questions.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate what Nina just said. So,
Hold it up.
Hold it up like this. We were involved with looking at San Pablo Avenue, and we were very much interested in housing like this building. And we do have it, in a way. We have the Berkeley Unified School District housing. And then we have buildings that have some affordable units in them, like the Jones, but it's only a very small percentage. So the question that I have is, the city had a 2-year planning situation for San Pablo Avenue, where they had several meetings. And they tried to connect with the community, but every time we, the community, went out and talked to businesses, the businesses didn't know anything about it. Or they thought, is this about AC Transit? I don't know if this is, no, it's about the city, it's about the city. And we went to every meeting and there would only be about 20 people there. And it's like, how could this be? So I have 2 questions. One is, how can we engage the wider community in what do people have, to offer in terms of really engaging with the city? And then my second question is, how can we get more buildings like the Maudelle Sherik building on San Pablo Avenue? Thank you.
I'm going to let Vanessa talk about her experience with the city and them not coming to the merchants. So the question I think is being asked, the merchants on San Pablo is another group that doesn't know what's happening. Do you have any advice?
I'm not sure I have advice, but I will say that it is true that the city never informed any of the businesses on Shattuck that there is this planned development. And we relied on the contact from an email from a concerned neighbor who said, hey, do you know this is going on? At which point there was kind of this, we sort of panicked and got together and tried to figure out a way to communicate with the city. I think that being persistently vocal is helpful. I don't know how to engage a wider audience. I think that's a challenge we have within the collective itself. And I think, people are stretched thin and maybe overwhelmed and intimidated by the process. I know that I am somebody who has a really hard time keeping track of legislation and rules and what has happened historically in Berkeley, partly because I don't live in Berkeley anymore. And I think that conversations you can have with anybody are helpful, because you never know when you will spark something in folks that will want them to, that will lead them to pursue more information or more support from the community. Yeah.
So go talk to your merchants, is what I'm hearing. Kelly?
I wish I had a good answer. I've been trying to get people engaged in the city for a long time, over a decade. We have a movement now with Save Berkeley Shops, where there's a lot of enthusiasm in trying to get the community organized. But what I really see is that, you know, we all have commitments and interests, and it seems like we don't engage until it's right next door. And then when we engage, when it's right next door, the die is already cast. And we, I just think if we care about our community, we need to make a commitment to really get engaged in the beginning. And it means giving up maybe one evening a month. But is our community worth one evening a month?
Great question. Are you going to answer the question about how do we get more Maudelle Sheriks around?
No. That's fascinating. But what I do want to say, and I echo my beloved Miss Richie, these are our employees.
Yeah.
The city leaders work for us. So we have to find a way to hold them accountable. They are our employees. So, and the other thing I want to say, as I look around this room, we are the elders, right? Where are the youth? Where are the college students? Where are the children? I mean, Deb, who's sitting right here, is a consummate organizer. It takes organizing. And so I think we're going to have to reach out and not just depend on ourselves at City Council, but get some of these other poignant, yeah, I see you, brother in the back, young man. I'm calling up some of these young, poignant, powerful, you know, people who have the energy to beat the boots on the ground, engaged in this fight to hold our city leaders accountable.
I don't know if the youth want to speak today. But if you want to, I'm going to give you the mics.
Amen.
How do we get the youth involved?
You know, so I'm in District 7, and public space is and was a huge part of getting youth involved in the local community. And namely, that's People's Park. Making sure that people have recreational activities, concerts, the ability to just hang out, and then they slowly but surely integrate into the economy. But what we're seeing is that businesses like Annapurna or Missing Link Bicycle Cooperative, these businesses are getting displaced. And we do have elders who are getting displaced as well, especially those who are unhoused. I can't tell you how many of my friends have been moved to Hayward, have been moved to Richmond, and it's because of this lottery system that comes with housing. And so when you have people who are young trying to explore, if you have people who are young trying to explore the local community, engaging with their elders who are now displaced, how do you build those intergenerational bridges? So I guess my short question would be, what is a way that we can force the city or make the city acknowledge that the local economy integrates within the local community, that upzoning in and of itself displaces that community, and to make sure that, how do we make sure that businesses are able to continue to participate with others? Does that make sense?
Do we want to try an answer to that?
Any city council members here? Is the mayor here?
We invited them.
So
We didn't invite them all.
how do we force them to be in community and not just at City Hall, and in things like this? I don't know, that doesn't answer that, you know.
Just a couple of things I'm thinking about. One is, do you know that Berkeley has more city employees per capita than any of our surrounding cities? And yeah, it's very heavy. And we dropped a lot of money on consultants. This corridors plan was $600,000. There's going to be a vote next Thursday by the Zoning Adjustment Board on the marina, the pier. And I think they spent $1.2 million on those consultants on the marina. So we're spending a lot of money. And the city is coming around now with their community meetings to ask us how we want to spend a $300 million bond that I believe is going to go into the general fund, which means that they can divert it to how they please. So maybe there's some different messages we need to give our city.
Okay, I'm gonna go. All right, I'll go.
Hi, first I'd like to thank everyone. This is a stunning quality panel. My name's Todd. I have two questions that are perhaps related. One, I don't understand where the housing numbers come from. Like in San Francisco, 82,000 more houses. Berkeley, you know, these numbers come from outer space? No. The population in California is static or declining in the last 5 years. So I don't know where these numbers come from. And now a related question is about YIMBY, because it seems to me that YIMBY is more than just about housing. It's a political project, and they have political goals that are above and beyond housing. Housing is a
backed by
front.
real estate.
There's a whole host of categories. I would just point out, for instance, the two YIMBY candidates, the YIMBY candidate for mayor in Los Angeles and the YIMBY city council person on Berkeley City Council, both in the same time interval, asked for more police and more tear gas. So I think they're interested in more than just housing. So these two questions. Where do these numbers come from? And what's your view of YIMBY as a political project?
Yes. Who wants to answer the money question?
I'll just answer the population question because I've been looking at this a lot. Actually, the population is decreasing. The birth rate now is 1.6. We need 2.1 for replacement, and I think the declining birth rate is actually good since if everyone lived in the United States, if the entire world lived like the United States, we would use up all of our resources by March 14th. But the numbers that were created for RENA, I mean, those were planned on tremendous growth. And we're going to go into decline in California starting around 2050. That's the projection. Although now, while our government is taking away immigrants with deportation, and we're not having immigration, that decline in population in California could happen much sooner than 2050. And here's the expert.
That's fine. So the question, what's amazing about this, right, is population isn't growing. There are these projections of a growth of 400,000 people in the Bay Area, 400,000 units of housing, not people, 400, so basically 1 million new residents of California, of the Bay Area in the next 8 years, now in the next 6 years, of this RENA cycle. And then that's how we get to Berkeley's little piece of that. At a time when, and they started doing the studies for these right before COVID, they were then allocating what each city was supposed to do in the middle of COVID without any desire to go back and say the world has changed. So they're looking at the tech boom of 2017 and making these projections based on that. And, like I said before, adding in a whole other layer, which somewhat made sense. We're looking at overcrowding and rent burden. We're going to add that in, but not saying rent burden and overcrowding is something that impacts extremely low-income folks. That is who is really needing more housing. That is where we need to solve that through additional affordable housing. So it's a game. It's a very clear game, and it's not a game that's about housing. It's a game about increasing land values, right? And some more luxury housing that stays vacant is a side effect of that. That's fine. If there's a little bit of affordable housing that happens because of that, that's fine. I think the other thing that I don't know the numbers in Berkeley, maybe one of you all know, but in San Francisco, we have 30,000 units that are approved that haven't been built. 30,000 units that are approved. So the developer approved, meaning they got their planning approval. They can't be stopped, they can't be going back. When you look at a piece of vacant property, you can get the number that it's worth unentitled and the number that it is worth entitled. Entitled means it was approved to build, X number of units. So the game is about, it's a monopoly game. It's a game about increasing the value of your land. And on the ideology side of the YIMBYs, they think they can make an argument that this is all going to create more housing that we desperately need. And I think that working class people do desperately need more housing. That is not the game that is being played.
We have time for just one more question, so.
Pablo Verde.
Thank you very much, and thank you for such important information. I wanted to share something that really has me bothered of recent. The East Bay Times reported back in early February that a 91-unit apartment building 2 blocks away from UC Berkeley was foreclosed on because they had a 42% vacancy rate. It's monthly not with $300,000, but they're bringing in something like $142,000 a month. And this is right next to the university, So here we are just trying, what can we do as citizens in Berkeley? What sort of, it's late in the game, but what can we do? Other than, yes, we do need to find candidates. Please, we need to find candidates for office. But also, what can we do is to put something on the ballot to say, this is what we want. And it's open to everybody.
Okay, does anyone want to take that?
I can get it and also introduce myself. I have an answer in part. So the expose of these false facts is really important. We have, I've got my back to the camera. I know for a fact, as you just stated that particular example, there are other empty units in Berkeley. So the real gotcha moment is to do, well, don't report this out because I'm trying to do something. But if you were to go in, as someone might do, to look at the units in a new building, inquire as to what's available, and what you will find, as I've learned in my day job, this is not why I'm here, but my job is, I work in housing. I'm a housing counselor. There are units in these new buildings being Airbnb. Airbnb is happening in the units that are being built.
Yes!
Empty buildings are happening as they're being built. They stay empty for a long time. I helped on the planning committee to put this together today, and I had a funeral that went a little long, but it was a beautiful ceremony. here in Berkeley, we aren't building affordable housing. That's problem number one. I went to every city council meeting for 10 years. Kelly and I were in all the same meetings. Zoning Adjustment Board meeting, Land Use Commission meeting, Design Review meeting. Go to all of them and speak up. I got one more below market rate unit by begging with the developer during the ZAB meeting. Their math was 10%, right, below market rate units out of the total, and it was a 90 unit building, stone fire. So 10% means what, 9, right? No, funny math, it's 8, he said. His ROI, the return on the investment, would require just 8. I said, sir, you can make it pencil out. I think you could do this, can't you? And we talked during the break, came back, and he agreed to do an additional unit, which a working family lives in, security guard downtown. So when we push and push and push and expose and expose and expose, you're a former journalist, and people who are reporters bring out the truth. All of us here, Margot is 90 years old, 30 years more than me, and she's still pushing it and putting out the truth and arguing. When we mobilized, we got an entire package of legislation passed after George Floyd. But we were in the streets. You do your sit-ins, you do your teach-ins. You've been an organizer for many years, my friend here. What we find is when you push, things change. You expose it, the light is out on the circles that they're trying to hide, you know? So a lot of this is really important to get to. What's affordable? Not $80,000, which is more than most teachers make, which is 80%, 50% of AMI. $185,000 is the average income in Berkeley. Black people don't live in Berkeley anymore, not only because they can't afford it, been displaced, had gentrification, but you don't feel welcome. People look at us like, what are you doing here? Do you belong? People look at us and like all the services and projects and programs we had in the past aren't here anymore. People are moving to Vallejo. I call Black Berkeley is Vallejo and Hayward. Right? Does it have to be that way? No. And I have more ideas, but we don't have enough time.
So we reached the point where we're going to do our breakout groups. So if you can stay and you want to talk to some of the panelists one-on-one, I'm going to ask everyone to go to a
Can I get a
different...
response to my question?
Yeah, he started the answer.
Which is, what can we do? You know, like what can we do besides changing our city council, but, you know, putting out maybe something that we push on?
We have an
Or
answer.
empty buildings.
The lawyer has an answer.
Sir.
It's like, I'll see it.
Go ahead. In San Francisco, we've had similar issues with, originally it was a Lembe's, was a local family, it was a property owner, it then became another huge property owner. They calculate increasing rents, they buy existing buildings, expecting a lot more evictions than thank God, our laws are able to stop or slow down. And then they're bankrupt because they calculated that they could evict everybody. And our city misses those opportunities to swoop in and buy those buildings and make them affordable buildings. A lot of cities in Europe, Berlin, Paris have laws or have legislation, create funding sources to acquire existing buildings, take them out of the speculative market and make them permanently affordable. And those are opportunities, but oftentimes that conversation happens after that's already happened, right? Oh, this happened, what could we do? Well, maybe we can start a fund. Well, that's gonna take a long time, blah, 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 blah. You work on it for 10 years and then the next crash happens and you miss the next opportunity. In San Francisco, we created what we call the Small Sites Acquisition Fund. It took 4 years to get the city to actually implement this thing, and then it's been a fight every year to get the city to put money into this fund to buy existing buildings, because the politicians don't get to go to ribbon cuttings when you buy an existing building with existing tenants that are there.
Can we have a small sites program in Berkeley? We do. So we have a council member on the budget committee who doesn't believe in it.
And how much millions did we take out of it?
You probably have
Who's
you
the
have a
city
better
council
number on
member?
that, but it's
Which city council member?
Kesawani.
Say the name.
Rashi Kesawani.
Okay, so I wanted to,
Janis, can I say one thing? Berkeley Neighborhoods Council, Janis is from Berkeley Neighborhoods Council, has asked people to sign in on these boards, and we just want to count the number of people. So if you haven't, please raise your hand and I'll come around. And
I was just gone for some
thank you
people
very
actually
much.
do.
I'm gonna give John the mic for just a minute.
Hi there, fantastic. I've learned a lot, and I'm kind of new at this. I've done a lot of other things, but as far as getting involved in Berkeley politics, the question is what can you do? And everyone has that question, and it's a fair one to ask. What I've kind of picked up from my involvement, I've been involved in Save Berkeley Shops and getting that off the ground with a lot of other people in this room, is that it seems that the city council is not responsive to what people here have been demanding, and a lot of other people as well. And I can tell you from conversations we've overheard from council members that they have a perspective, some of them, that there's no use in trying to please you people because you're going to be against everything. And we also recently heard that as a lot of people got together to protest a new project, which is going to boot a building, boot a existing building and existing businesses and put up a monstrosity that was not going to be affordable housing, we heard that it's a false narrative to think that council is not being responsive to the demands of the Berkeley citizens. The proof for that is that Berkeley elected the people that are on council today. And so they view that because I am on council, I am representing the will of the people, and to a certain extent they have a point. We need candidates to run to make them realize that there is competition that will cause their actions to be called into question.
Okay, Don, you
But-
run.
I wish I could say I am, but I am not this time. The point is, there have been a lot of issues that people are feeling that this council is not responsive. They feel that it is responsive to the needs of the developers. They feel that it is responsive to the needs of other special interests that have loud mouths, lots of people to send to meetings, and most importantly, money to give to advance a political career. Things tend to build to the point where they reach a boiling point. Everything does. And it seems to me that now that the city council has been doing the same thing they did in San Pablo and ramrodding through this process of basically converting our successful small business districts into God knows what, that has now generated enough of a firestorm that they're getting a lot of pushback. And yes, we are organized, and I have flyers to give you if you want to get help and send some emails and things you can do to engage, to be following what's going on this. My point is that whatever you care about, if it is affordable housing, if it is protecting the shops, whatever it is, if you want a responsive council, you've got to engage. And now I think we're at a moment where we've got their attention. They are concerned because they are fearing the political consequences from the actions they have undertaken so far and what they're planning to do. And so I think this is the moment to rise up, to get involved. We are organizing house parties to anyone else to spread the word, to have an event like this, which is so fantastic because more people are learning. But there are a lot of people that don't know. And as council starts to see house parties happening where people are getting together in districts all throughout the city, they will get increasingly nervous and be more responsive to what the citizens want. And that is the time, by spreading the word, getting involved, writing letters to council, but that's not enough. We've got to get more people aware of this so that council realizes, wait a minute, the city is pushing back. And I've got to be more responsive to what the people are saying. We are not there now, but we will get there. And if you spread the word more, we will get there sooner.
Thank you. So everyone in this room has to go tell 10 people and get them involved. Jean, so these are all our co-sponsors, Save Berkeley Shops, Healthy Black Families, Friends of Adeline.
Hi, I can't stand up. It's a little hard for me.
You have to hold them up.
So I'm from Friends of Adeline.
Build a better Berkeley.
And I'm sorry, I didn't say build a better Berkeley.
I'm from Friends of Adeline, and we have been working in the South Berkeley community for the last 8 years, primarily around the issue of what's happening at BART, having to do with housing, also having to do with jobs, also having to do with young people. My point is, there have been successful or important movements in Berkeley. We're not starting at zero. Now, a lot of them were a long time ago. We got rent control because thousands of tenants were willing to go on rent strike and to cause havoc in the city of Berkeley until people came around and developed rent control. We had a major campaign around community control of police. Thousands and thousands of people. We didn't win, but we did get 15,000 votes versus 20,000 votes for a program to control the police department. These things happened not because people sat around and talked about it. It happened because people got angry. And I guess what I don't hear enough in this room is real anger. The anger that the city has been stolen. The anger that our politicians are crooks. Look at who contributes to their campaigns. They get thousands of dollars from the building industry. Scott Wiener wants to run for Congress. He is the child of money from the real estate industry. Our council, our representative in the state legislature, Buffy Wicks, where did she come from? Never lived in this community. Comes here 2 years and gets elected to Congress, to the Assembly. How did that happen? Thousands and thousands of dollars from Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party and real estate interests. So let's be clear about that. These people take what they want. We have to get angry and say, we're not going to allow you. We have to get out in the streets. We have Miss Ritchie who says, you have to make noise. And that really means make noise. Don't pay attention at the city council when they say sit down. Have hundreds of people shouting at them, do what we want and we'll sit down.
Okay, so on that note, I am going to thank our panelists so much for being here. And I especially want to thank Nina for hosting us here at Healthy Black Families. Okay, so for those of you who want to stay, and I'm going to ask if the panelists can stay and want to go to each corner of the room. You can pick your panelist and go ask some more questions and have some more conversation. For those of you on Zoom, we'll see if we can get the video up. So thank you all for coming. There's cookies in the back.